Howdy, and welcome to the Breakaway Podcast. Breakaway is a Bible study recorded on the campus of Texas A&M. For more information on Breakaway, please visit breakawayministries.org. We hope you enjoy the message and stick around for more at the end.
Well, it was interesting in preparation for tonight. I kept thinking about my first experience walking into Kyle Field. It was my freshman year for Midnight Yell. And I came in knowing surprisingly little about Texas A&M when I arrived as a student. And so that was my first time to walk into Kyle Field. And I was coming with my roommates who were seniors at the time, and I was like, so what is this we're doing now? Like, we're gonna practice for the yells we're gonna do tomorrow? And they're like, yeah, that's kind of how it goes. We're gonna come and we practice at midnight for some reason for the yells that we'll do tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And they're like, yeah, so we're gonna practice the yells, and then at a certain moment, they're gonna turn out the lights and you're gonna make out with the girl you brought. And I was like, wait, I'm sorry, what? Like, yeah, you're gonna turn out the lights and you're gonna make out with somebody, but don't worry if you didn't bring somebody, which I didn't bring somebody, like, that's not gonna be a problem. We'll give you a lighter, you're gonna hold up a light, and someone will come around and find you and you'll make out with them. And I was like, what? Like, suddenly, like, all this stress came up and I was like, what does that have to do with football? Like, I'm not prepared for this moment at all. And they didn't present it to me as something that was like optional, you know? I was a freshman scared to death. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And kind of thinking through my play, like, do I cough, act like I'm sick? Do I hit the ground? Like, what do I do? And I wasn't sure. I'm not ready for this. And so, I don't know, I think I shook my roommate's hand or something like that. I was like, good game, you know, sort of But I remember it struck me as interesting just when they turned out the lights in that instant. I thought, how amazing that something as simple as flipping a light switch just kicked off a million different emotional responses in this place, you know? Like that simple act just conjured all kinds of responses. Like some people were so excited. They were waiting for that moment because they were with somebody that maybe they just started dating, or it was the first night and things are going pretty well. And so they were thinking through their play, like looking at them going, you know, it's like, so they're all kind of geared up, butterflies going, like there's that person that's all excited. I was like, and then there's that couple that's been dating for like 14 years, you know, which isn't even right, but you know that couples like that they come into college and they're already like an old couple, you know what I mean? So they're at the game and they're like, oh, here we go. You know, there's that couple that is kind of comforting, business as usual. There's other people, when those lights clicked out, it just made them think about who was there with them at Midnight Yell last time that isn't now, and you know, all the pain that rises up and just the bitterness of it, that they're like, every Midnight Yell reminds me that I'm desperately alone, you know? And I just thought, how interesting. Just that simple click of the lights conjures all these different emotional responses in a moment, right? And the same thing happens when you mention the word dating. Just by thinking about the concept of dating, millions of responses come up in different crowds of us. I've said the word dating in front of crowds and they've cheered that we're going to talk about it. I've said it in front of crowds and they've groaned that we're going to talk about it. You get all kinds of different responses. And it's fascinating because dating is an exciting, stressful, sad, exhilarating experience. You see people land all over the map coming up and talking about dating. For some people, it just brings up all kinds of stress because they go, I don't know how to do it. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do if I'm interested in somebody. Do I call them? Are they going to think I'm a stalker? Like, why is he calling me? So, okay, I'm supposed to what? Just like comment a lot on their Instagram at one point? Or people are like, what are you doing? You're like, I don't know. So should I try to send a private message, or is that trying to create a secret world too fast? Or so do I text them? I don't know. And when I ask them out to where? Do I try to make it chill? Like, I don't know, let's just go study. Or they're going to be like, are we hanging out? Are we dating? What do you even call it? So where do I invite them? Do I invite them to a coffee shop? Do I invite them to Breakaway? Maybe some of you tried that even now. I don't know. So you do I try? What am I supposed to do with them, right? For other people, it's a great source of joy, dating. Because as soon as it comes up, you think about that time you did get the text from that guy, right? And he was like, hey, do you want to meet up? And you were like, I think oh my God. And you showed all your friends, have you seen this? What do you think this means? I don't know what it means. What are you going to do? What are you doing? I don't know. What should I say? Oh my God. And you start taking it. No. You're going to erase it. You're going to erase it. And he's just seeing those little dots go by. Like, what is she going to say? Oh my God. And she says, yes, I'm going to go. And she's all celebrating with her friends. I'm going to go with him. And he just drops his phone and is like, say my name. It's happening, people. Right? And there's joy that rises up in people when they think about dating and the potential of it. And there's also pain. And I'll be honest with you, I remember one of the times we met out here at Breakaway at Kyle Field. We decided to do something where we set out all these trash cans and we had people, we just talked about dark sins, secret sins will eat you up inside and you don't need to carry them. And so we said as a first step, why don't you write out some things that you go, I'm carrying some guilt and shame over this thing and I need to get it out and let this be a first step. And we had thousands of students walk down and drop all these comments in these trash cans down at the front of Kyle Field. And I went through and started looking over them as I was praying for these students, and probably 3, 4 out of 5 were about desperate hurt and desperate heartbreak because they got into a relationship they know they shouldn't have, or a relationship went places they wished it hadn't, or they had done some things that felt right in the moment and now they deeply regret. And they've burned some bridges, hurt some relationships, lost some friends. And I'll tell you what, in my office, nobody cries like the person that's been broken up with. I've counseled students through death, and they don't cry like the people who are broken up with. The death of a relationship can be so painful, right? This impulse in us to pair off is good. It's powerful. And when we pair off well, it's an exhilarating power. When it goes poorly, it's deeply painful for us. And so I want to talk about how do we do it right? And so here's a few things, because I think it's so confusing. We did a series on dating a few years ago, and I tried to avoid it for years, and then I realized you got to do it every couple of years because the language changes, the culture changes, and so much has changed about you guys, and I've read countless articles about you and your dating trends to the point where I'm just exhausted by them. But let me tell you a few things that we do know. The vast majority of you want to get married. There was a survey that came out a few years ago that said when asked, do you want to be married, only 70% of millennials said yes. That means 30% said no, and it kicked off a torrent of commentaries and articles being written saying that's the lowest percentage in history. There's this massive number of people that are millennials that don't want to get married, and it launched all these comments for like, marriage is therefore a dead institution, therefore we need to do away with marriage, therefore we should just have little short-term contracts every 2 years, we should have beta marriages, move in each other, polyamorous this, and there's going on and on and on. And then they did a second survey where they asked the same groups, people, same age group, would you like to be unmarried your entire life? And only 8% said yes, which means 92% want to get married. So when you ask people, do you want to get married? Only 70% said yes. And so then they said, do you want to not be married? And only 8% said yes. So 92% want to get married. It just depends on how you ask the question. It took a lot of reading to land on that, y'all. Well, that's number one. The vast majority of you want to get married, right? And here's number two. The vast majority of you will get married. If the statistics hold all throughout history, the vast majority of you will get married. And I know that brings up some fear in some people. You're like, well, what if I'm the one that doesn't get married? You might be, I don't know. But the vast majority of you will get married. And here's the mind-blowing thing that's been tripping me up lately. The vast majority of you will get married in your 20s. If you look at the globe through human history, the vast majority of human beings get married in their 20s. Isn't that crazy? That's such a big thing in your life, such a big decision. And for the vast majority of you, in the next 7 to 10 years, you will meet that person and settle down with them. You're going to pass through these distinct phases of singleness, dating, engaged, married, pretty soon. And we got to figure out how to navigate those, right? And yet here's the interesting thing about your generation that's unique. So you're like all other generations in the fact that you want to get married as bad as they do, and you probably will get married around when they did. But here's the reality is that you are waiting longer to get married than any generation in human history. Your generation's waiting longer to get married more than any generation since it's been recorded. The average young person now gets married at age 27 if you're a woman, 29 when you're a man. To put that in perspective, in the 1990s, the average woman got married in age 23, the average man age 26. It's the 1990s. That's not like back in the 40s or something, right? But now it's 27 and 29. And so I've been looking at that about you. The vast majority are getting married much, much later. And the question's arisen in my mind, why? Why, if everyone wants to get married, are we waiting so long to get married, right? And there's all kinds of different reasons of studies of why it's happening with you guys. And there's a bunch of different reasons. Maybe you'll resonate with some of these. I'm not going to go through them all exhaustively. But number one is there's a fear of divorce. Some of you saw your parents get divorced. You saw the pain it caused. You felt the pain it caused in your life. And you say, I don't want to rush into marriage because I don't want to rush into a mistake. And so we're going to wait and wait and wait to be sure. And I resonate with that. Some of you, it's concern that marriage will derail your plans. There's some people that say, well, man, I have some plans. I need to figure out where I'm going in my life. I need to get my career on track. I have some goals with my career. And if I get a husband, he might interfere with those. If we have kids, they'll definitely interfere with them. So I got to get these people out of the way so they don't mess up my life. And so in the past, where marriage used to be the first step into adulthood, they called it cornerstone marriage, where you would build your adulthood. Now it's the last step. Let me get some financial security, get my career rolling, and let's have a capstone marriage. It'd be sort of the last thing I do after I got everything else in my life figured out, because I want to make my decisions without someone else influencing me. There's this impetus for autonomy. Auto, which means self, nomos, law, I rule. I decide my life, not somebody else. Number three is confusion about communication. And we talked about that last semester, about the advent of technology has made it super confusing. Like in the past, if you wanted to ask someone on a date, you would call them. Now they think you're insane or something. You're like, I don't know, is it safe to call, or should I only text? Or should I do Facebook? Or is Facebook lame now? I don't know. And so there's all this confusion about how to talk to each other. And for some people, that's slowed down the dating process. For others, it's the paralysis of endless options. You go back in the day in the 1930s, 1/3 of all couples who got married lived within a 5-block radius of each other before they got married. 1 in 6 lived on the same block. 1 out of every 8 lived in the same building. 1930s. So basically you would turn 20 and be like, you good? Okay, let's go. Right? That's basically how it went. Now you get online and it's just this endless sea of options from around the globe, and you're just swiping through them going, her, no. She likes a different football team, no. Right? And on we go. And there's this paralysis of seemingly endless options, right? For others, it's the pressure to find a soulmate, that I'm not just looking for a good companion in life, I'm looking for someone who will complete me. That they will fill every vacancy and awaken the dormant gifts inside. That I'm looking for some person to do some amazing things in me to fill my soul, right? For others, it's the fulfillment of sex outside of a relationship. That in the past, sexual drive would lead people into marriage because marriage was the safest place and the right place to have sex. Now, sex has been taken outside of that, right? And the reality is some people go in. Sex was a big driver into marriage, but now sex can be had anywhere, anytime, with people, not with people online. I can do whatever. And it's delayed the covenanting with another human being. And it was interesting, as I've been reading all this about you guys and just kind of thinking about all this, I was looking at what are the main drivers for delaying getting married. And as I was looking at what's driving our fears, it's fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of missing out, fear of losing opportunities. It's pride. I want to run my own life. Or it's lust. I don't want to have to commit to love you emotionally. I just want to look at your body or use it for a night, right? And so fear, lust, and pride are driving a lot of our relational decisions these days. And let me tell you something, young people, they are not driving us in the best of directions. For the first time in the history of our country, the average age of a first birth, of a first having a child, is younger than the average age of your first marriage. On average, women in America are having their first child at age 26, and the average woman in America gets married at age 27. That hasn't happened in the history of our nation. That 48% of the children born in our country today are born with dad already gone. And every measurable we have about children says without a loving two-parent home, it does inestimable damage to a young person to not have the security of a loving mom and dad in the home, right? Dating websites are I'm not going to bash on them. I know people that have met on them, but as you've watched the trend in dating websites, it's moving more and more towards just analyzing people's physicality, that we're basing relationships from 2005 to 2012. 1/3 of all couples who got married in America met on a dating site. And as you look at the progression of dating sites, it's built almost entirely on charm or beauty, which are not good foundations for a marriage, right? And the reality is the Center for Disease Control just put out a recent study. The Center for Disease Control that said the advent of Tinder and things like that have seen a skyrocketing percentage of sexually transmitted diseases in Rhode Island since the advent of Tinder and Grindr, et cetera. Syphilis has gone up 79%. 79%! Gonorrhea and HIV over 30%, right? And some of you aren't on that because in college you don't have to, right? But the reality is, man, as you look at self-reporting in college students and in young people in their 20s, there's more self-reported loneliness and depression than previous generations. Why am I telling you all this? Because there's a connectivity with technology, but there's a loss of community. And we have fear and lust and pride driving us into shallow relationships or keeping us away from relationships. And the reality is the directions our fears and lusts and pride are leading us aren't the best directions. Right? So you go, what are you advocating, Ben? Some throwback to some bygone era that was amazing when we all got married at 13 and had kids when we were 14. No, I don't have some kind of misty-eyed, glowy view of the past. I don't. But the reality is I look at us today and go, man, we are adrift in life of how to relate to each other. And there's a lot of pain out there in us. And the reality is we're not sure how to connect with one another. And we are like lost at sea out here in the midst of a loss of intimacy. And often where there's a loss of intimacy, addiction takes its place. And we see many of us struggling with addictions and wrestling with intimacy, and we're adrift, and it's really hard to find a partner in life when we don't even know what life's about. It's hard to find a companion on the journey when we don't know where our life is going. And so as we talk about dating and relationships and singleness, what I wanted to start with tonight is not how to get a date, because the truth is anyone can get one. You can get one tonight. You lower your standards enough, you can get married tonight, right? So we'll talk about how to get married later. But the truth is, before we get into how we deal with this other person, we have to deal with us. There's something going on with us, that we're like people lost at sea. And here's the good news. If you're lost out there, if you were lost back in the day, if you were lost out in a life raft at sea, there's something you can always know that's amazing, and that is the North Star always points true north. And so wherever you're lost in the sea, if you were out in a raft, if you could find the North Star, you could figure out where you are. Steve Callahan was lost in a little rubber life raft for 76 days in the Pacific Ocean by himself. He found the North Star and used what he knew of nautical realities, measuring its distance from the horizon. He knew exactly what latitudinal line he was on the globe and was able to paddle safely to the Caribbean, right? And the reality is wherever you feel lost, some of you have been in relationships and have been burned and been hurt. Some of you have never been in relationships and are scared and don't even know how to start it, and you feel adrift in the world. But wherever you feel lost, there's a true north, a relationship with God, that if we can get that right, it will help us navigate our relationships with each other right. And let me tell you something, we must get our relationship with God right before we'll ever get a relationship with a guy or a girl right. And the truth is, as you look at our Bible, as our Bible speaks to us about human life, there's sections on sex and dating and marriage and relationships. You get the first couple meeting in Genesis. You get Song of Solomon. You get talking about singleness in 1 Corinthians. You get the marriage passage in Ephesians. And if we were to add up all the sections about dating, it would add up to about this much. And there's this whole other part that you go, Ben, if I want to get married, I want to get dating, you're saying that's all the Bible cares about? What is all this? Dating's the biggest thing in my life. Well, it's big when it's right in front of your face. But when you pull it back, it is not the biggest or most critical relationship in your life, so it's not the one that the Bible is the most concerned with.